Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Ask GN. We're shooting 3 this week technically. 2 of them are for public release, and then 1 of them is for Patreon release. As always, leave your questions in the comment section below for the next episode or episodes. What we're doing right now is we're going to do a trial here. We're doing a pilot. The plan is to air 2 Ask GNs for this week, maybe next, and they're going to be about 12 hours apart. So we're not removing a video slot from the production cycle, we're adding one. So we'll be trying 8 videos per week. If it performs well, if people like it, we'll keep doing that. If not, then we'll go back to 1 Ask GN per week max. And then the Patreon bonus version, if you go to patreon.com/gamersnexus and support us there, all backer tiers get the bonus episode, and then $5 backer tiers get the behind the scenes stuff. We just shot a behind the scenes video of our fan testing setup, for example, and today we'll be shooting one of our power supply testing. So before that, this video is brought to you by EVGA and the X299 Dark motherboard for the Intel high-end desktop CPUs. The X299 Dark is one of the only motherboards on the market with proper VRM cooling. We've tested this and found significant performance increase over those without active cooling on the VRMs. This board was used in our recent attempt to set a top 10 record in Firestrike, and you can learn more about the X299 Dark at the link in the description below. First question for this week is kind of a tricky one, or actually the first 2 questions are kind of tricky. It's from Arby, who says, with the GPP gone now, do you think AMD, or do you think board partners, like ASUS will revert back to their original branding like ROG Strix for AMD cards? Or do you think the damage is done and Nvidia has still won? The first thing I'm going to say is I want to keep it real here. And say from a consumer perspective, I think, like most slights against anybody in this industry anyway, I think that the whole GPP thing will be forgotten, for better or for worse, pretty quickly. I mean, look at what happened. Kyle from HardOCP, not Bitwit, broke the story, and then we covered it quite a few times, but mostly to the effect of we're looking into it. Before I finally released recently the thing that talked about what we found. A couple other people covered it, but eventually as Kyle's leads went silent and everyone else's went silent, you didn't hear about GPP anymore. So it was still there in the back of the minds of everybody. We were still talking to GPP poll. We obviously released that video talking about what we found. The point is, though, that was when GPP was still a thing and when there were still some bits of information that people could release. Now that it's basically at least claimed to be dead by Nvidia's blog post, I honestly think that this is going to be something that is just forgotten by consumers. The GTX 970, for example, is probably the most tangible instance where Nvidia's done something that they've been slapped on the wrist for publicly, and it was a settlement, I suppose. I don't think they ever admitted wrongdoing. I think it was they just settled for a class action, and that's pretty much forgotten at this point as well. And to some extent, that's okay, I think, if the companies have righted their wrongs, or in this case, paid out a settlement, and they don't do it again. I think it's okay to forgive and forget, or at least forget. But also, at the same time, consumers, as an amorphous mass of people, do have a really short memory and attention span. Part of that, I think, is outrage culture, where everyone wants to find something to be outraged at every single week or day even, whether it's actually worthy of outrage or not. And some of it is just because there's so much going on and people have lives, and it's unreasonable to expect anyone. Look at, like, outside the industry, look at Volkswagen. They're doing just fine, and they had a pretty serious scandal with the whole emissions thing. So I think in general, consumers and the culture we live in does lend itself to forgetting about things like GPP. And the Volkswagen thing, as the example, outside the industry is a bit more serious than GPP in terms of like actual world impact. So I do think that people will forget about it. Now, as for your question, forgetting is not really the question. The question is, do you think it will have impact? So I mean, obviously, if it's not clear, I don't actually know an answer to this because it's kind of impossible for anyone to know an answer to this. But I can give you the best kind of guesses, educated guesses to my knowledge based on talking with the partners at manufacturers. So the first part of the question, do you think companies like ASUS will revert back to original branding? From what I understand, the ROG branding I don't think was ever going to be an Nvidia brand. I think it was going to be the sub-brands of ROG, like Strix, like you pointed out, that were going to be clawed at by Nvidia away from AMD. I don't know. I have not spoken with ASUS about this. I've not spoken with any of the companies specifically. Well, I don't have answers I can share because a lot of them won't share with me what's happening next. But we'll be at Computex soon, and I suspect I'll get more information there. People tend to be more willing to talk in person. If you are in the industry, hello, and you're one of those people who's willing to talk to me about what's going to happen next off the record, pull me aside at Computex and tell me what you want to tell me, and then if I can publish it as an anonymous source, and I would love to do that. But consider this a petition for information when I meet with you at Computex. But otherwise, I do think that this was killed pretty early, GPP, and I know that it's been in discussion for a while. Some of the products that people talked about not having gaming brands attached to them as a result of GPP, like that Gigabyte box or some of the MSI cards that were discussed, some of that stuff's been in flight for a while now, like a year. So the question is, well, has GPP been something behind the scenes for a year that we've never known about? And those companies have been working to remove their gaming brands from those AMD products for a year? Or did they actually just genuinely decide not to brand them as the gaming brands a year ago, and then GPP came out and it looked like a coincidence? I don't know. I don't think... what I'm most curious about is what's going to happen to the new AMD brands that emerged after GPP, where AMD was like, there's this whole Nvidia GPP thing. We're going to make our own brands for AMD cards. I don't know what'll happen to those. I think that comes away the most questionable, because it's like AMD announces they're going to have special brands for the cards, and then Nvidia's like, never mind, we're walking away from it. So I don't know what's going to happen there. I kind of feel like nothing's really going to change, to be honest with you. I'm genuinely not sure, but my suspicion presently is that unless Nvidia is still pulling some strings behind the scenes that we don't know about, I honestly believe that if GPP is dead and there's not something silent we don't know about that's replacing it, that brands like ROG Strix will remain attachable to AMD cards. That's kind of what I think right now. But I don't know, and I hope to talk to some people at Computex and find out, and I'm sorry I don't have a really good answer for you, but hopefully that's given you some of my questions for you to think about. And then what I would ask of you all is, if you hear more about GPP and what's going on, or if you, this is kind of like, I have to be careful here, because I want to say, if you see something, say on the next cards launch from AMD or whatever, if you see there's no Strix branding, there's no Aorus branding, stuff like that, please let me know, but also please be careful of jumping to conclusions. Just let me know in a neutral fashion. Twitter and comments are great, especially AskGN comments, because I read more of those than any other video, and then we will do our best to look into it at that time. But at this time, it's really hard for me to say what's going to happen. However, I primarily picked this question to include, to one, give you some insight as to stuff I did know, like the timelines for everything, and some thoughts on how consumers forget everything instantly. And that's okay sometimes, but not always. And then BP is another great example of a company that probably shouldn't have been forgiven. But and then a third point here is to just put out a public note that if you're in the industry, get in touch with me. My email's on the website under the contact page. Get in touch with me, let's talk, or meet at Computex, whatever. And if you have stuff you can share off record that we can publish, that'd be fantastic. And that's really the main reason for including this. Next one. Talpss Recreational Nukes says, Steve, Kyle from HardOCP said that his website is basically done and over thanks to his journalism on GPP. By running stories that put Nvidia in a harmful light, do you think the impact on GN will be as severe, or will GN fare better because GN didn't break the story? I am not worried at all. I don't know what Kyle's situation is. I don't really know him. I don't know if we've even met, or if we did, it was a long time ago. I don't know much about HardOCP. for the GN side of this, I'm not worried. Like this is kind of what we do is beat companies up over things, and I didn't break the GPP story, so certainly that does have a relationship. Like there's a difference in how much your relationship with the company is affected by breaking a story versus by following up with a story when everyone else does. And also, we didn't have any information at all on the GPP thing. So I think, well, Kyle openly said that AMD floated the story to him, and they never talked to us about it because I think they were still pissed at us for what we said about them with the Threadripper stuff regarding embargoes. So we never even heard about the thing until Kyle published it when all of you heard about it. So that certainly has an impact. But also, I guess the only reason I'm bringing this one up is because I'd like to say with any company, this is not an Nvidia specific thing, with any company, I'm not really too worried about pissing them off because we've got a couple things, so kind of public disclosure of some of our strategy if you haven't figured it out. We're pushing Patreon, we're pushing product sales like the GNModmat, which I'll plug right now, it's on the table. These 3D teardown crystal things are pretty cool. The merch store has them. It's a big glass object with a laser engraved logo in it. We're making more products too. The point is, by splitting ourselves to do some product manufacturing, Patreon direct support, we're working with a lot of companies in the industry in terms of like, I mean, I work with case makers, power supply makers now with our new test setup, fan makers now, motherboard vendors, video card vendors, all this stuff. So even if we piss off all the video card makers, we'll be okay because we have enough support from the community through merch sales, through Patreon, through other avenues like just straight AdSense on YouTube even is okay these days. We have enough support, and I've specifically diversified our revenue streams heavily enough that if we piss companies off, it's fine. We don't need their direct product sampling if it means that I have to kiss their ass. I'd rather buy it myself. And so I've established ourselves in a position where we can do that now. And you know, if they make a good product, great. I'm happy to review it positively. If they make a bad one, that's fine too. I'm not really afraid to review things negatively. That said, obviously there's always a relationship juggle where you kind of have a certain amount of social capital you can burn with these companies where you kind of make a decision like, this product's absolute garbage, this thing they're doing is bad. Do I want to burn both these things at once, or do I want to space them out a bit to give some time to heal? Because if you do too much at once, yeah, you definitely incinerate that bridge instantly with the wrong type of headquarters in charge. A lot of the PR people and tech marketing people do end up on our side of things, and they'll advocate for us internally because a lot of the time I find that they understand things pretty well. They're very level-headed. PR and tech marketing especially are the closest to enthusiast users that you'll get with a lot of these companies, and they tend to advocate for us, so that's great. But headquarters can put their foot down and say, stop sampling them, they just burned us twice back to back. We need to stop this. And that's fine, we're not entitled to product, I'll buy it. But the point is I can buy it now because we have all the support from you all, which is really important because if the only audience I have to please is the viewers, then we're in good shape. Because that's what I'm not here to, like, I would rather be an attachment of the audience, of the consumers, in terms of like being an arm attached to consumers that you could use to hit things with, as opposed to being attached to the companies off over here where we just market stuff. So if all I have to do is focus on what you all want, that's where I want to be. And if we have your support and we're selling things like products, real products and merchandise and whatever, and we have other avenues, other streams of revenue, AdSense, just straight AdSense, stuff like that, we'll be okay. Obviously, advertising money makes things complicated, but the whole point of what we're doing, the reason you see me pushing this ModMat so much, and I'm sure it's kind of annoying sometimes, but I'm sorry, the reason I do it is because this stuff allows us to distance ourselves from manufacturers as advertisers, as sources of revenue, which means that I don't even have to worry if I piss them off. So, yeah, I mean, it's a strategy to do what we're doing, and it's working pretty well. So don't worry about me. Don't worry about GN. We're not going anywhere. We're in a good position right now, and I think it allows us to kind of do whatever we want to do. So we're in good shape. Next question. Oh, actually, I should mention one more thing. The last thing I want to mention is I made fun of that vacuum thing a while ago, right? And even though I made fun of it, and it was stupid for a lot of reasons, there is one thing I wanted to mention, which is non-manufacturer sponsors. We ran ads for a couple of them recently. People who don't make computer components that are sponsors are the best advertisers you really could ask for as viewers, because the vacuum thing notwithstanding, because everyone released a video the same day, it was like the stupidest, most see-through thing you could do as a marketing company. But let's just say one YouTuber put out a vacuum video, or put out, I kind of hate sponsored content, so let's say an ad within a video for a vacuum. That's okay with me. Sponsored content I hate, but the point I'm getting at is if you run ads for Dyson, if we sold an ad to, I don't know, let's say like Dollar Shave Club, we've sold ads to them. Running an ad in our ad spot for Dollar Shave Club or for the GN store even is the kind of ideal place you want to be, because the more non-manufacturer ad partners you can establish, like Linus has done, for example, as an extreme example, the more distant you are from any concern of bias or anything like that. Whether it's sort of subconscious bias or whether it's viewer perceived bias, you're farther away from it by working with non-manufacturer advertisers. So that's also something you want to keep an eye out for. In terms of our future, is how to, and that's how we're shoring ourselves up so we can continue doing whatever the hell I want and saying whatever I want about products. Because I like saying when a product is not deserving of praise, and I'm going to keep it that way. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this job. Next question. BuffMcLargeHuge. Second attempt. Hey, Steve, if one were to build a streaming PC capable of outputting two 1080p 60 streams with reasonable bitrate settings at the same time, how many cores would be necessary? Great question. I was planning on using Threadripper 1950X. I'm not sure if that's enough cores, or it's definitely enough cores. Your question of if it's overkill is kind of a different one. But first example, we did dual streaming tests with the 7900X and later with Threadripper. Yeah, we did it with Threadripper. And so if you look up our Threadripper review, we should have a streaming benchmarks page that I think we did a dual stream where we output to both Twitch and YouTube simultaneously. I think at 1080p 60 actually. I think Twitch was 6 megabits per second. I think YouTube might have been 10. And Threadripper, to the best of my memory, does perfectly fine in those scenarios. So definitely it's enough to sustain you. Is it overkill? It depends on your streaming settings. I probably, if I wanted to do a dual stream and not use Restream or something like that, just a raw dual stream out of my system, I probably would want Threadripper or an HEDT Intel CPU, either one, by which I mean like 12, 14 core area. Maybe 10 core, but 12 or 14 kind of makes me most comfortable. I think with either of those setups, I know with Threadripper, I'm positive that you can do dual stream. I can't remember what speed settings we used for H.264 encoding. Check the review for the 1950X review for that. I want to say it was probably faster though. And faster puts out pretty good quality. So H.264 software encoding at faster with effectively 16 megabits per second, if your internet cannot sustain it at that point, is pretty good. And you can always drop it down to fastest or something. Getting below that, you do lose some quality. Getting above it, you kind of enter placebo territory. So yeah, I'd be perfectly happy to recommend a 1950X or like, what is it, 7940 or one of those CPUs would be good for that task. I'd definitely be fine recommending either of those from Intel or AMD, and you should be pretty happy with it. Just watch out for your internet, for your upload speed. That's probably your biggest potential bottleneck. Next question, Mike Hlodwig says, how do you feel about Google's new sponsor button? It's now in beta for non-gaming channels. It seems to be similar to Twitch. For $5 a month, you support your favorite channel, and in return you get perks like exclusive badges, emojis, for live streams, access to sponsor-only posts on our community tab. Do you think it's a possible solution for channels that are being demonetized? Is this something you would consider doing? I do not. If I were concerned about YouTube demonetizing me, I would not then put my faith in the sponsor button owned by YouTube. Let me start there. I presently have no plans to start using the sponsor button on YouTube. I feel like YouTube got on the boat a bit late here. I think they killed the channel thing that Kyle was doing, Bitwit Kyle this time. When he did Bitwit Ultra on YouTube, they killed that stuff. And then they saw how much money was going to Patreon, and I think YouTube was like, wait a minute, that should be our money. So I think they got on the boat a bit late, and the problem I have with the sponsor button right now, with Patreon, we can take, I don't remember what the minimum is, but I know our lowest tier is $2. So with Patreon, we can take $2, we can take $100. And even though $2, the average is less than $5, I'm pretty sure our average is, I don't know, it's between like $3 and $4 or something. Average is less than $5. So yeah, it's lower on average than the sponsor button. However, with Patreon, we take like 95% of the money. With the sponsor button, we would take 70. 30% of your money is going to YouTube. With Patreon, I can allow people who don't have $5 a month to support us and get access to things like primarily our Discord, where you can basically talk with our team or with our members in the community. So my view of it really right now is I would rather be more inclusive and have if Patreon allowed it, I'd have a floor of a penny. But I think their minimum is like $1 these days. It might be $2, but I think it's $1. So I'd rather have a floor of $1 or $2 and allow people who can't afford $5 to join. Like if you're in a country with a weaker currency than US currency and you maybe just don't have a lot of money, but you can afford $2, I'd rather allow that than create a wall. Like to me, your wall should basically be, do you pay or not how much do you pay. And obviously there's some things for which you do require more money, by which I mean I require more money. Like if I'm sending you a shirt, of course I'm going to require like $20, at which point internationally we might even lose money, but that's fine because the idea is it's Patreon and maybe you'll continue giving $2 the months after that and it'll make up for it. But if it's just like digital access to Discord, I'm fine with a $2 donation, and I'd rather be inclusive of our community. There has to be some kind of wall there. I just spent a few minutes talking about how Patreon supports us. So obviously I have to have like, if I'm going to be on Discord talking to people, it can't be to 10,000 people. It's got to be to the people who support on Patreon. So there does have to be some kind of wall. I think 5's too high. And I also think that YouTube should, it's also too low at the same time. Like if someone wants to give me $20 and make up for all the people giving me $2, then I'd obviously like to support that as well. I'd love to send them a shirt or whatever. And Patreon makes that a bit easier for us. So Patreon does absolutely have problems, and I do have problems with it. But I think it's a better solution than the sponsor button presently. And I like its flexibility in that you can kind of set rates, let people pay what they want for the most part. I like that a lot about it. And they also let us keep more of the money. Super Chat takes like, I think 30% also. It's a lot. So does YouTube for the sponsor button. And it's one thing if AdSense takes 45%. It's another thing if people giving you money takes 30%. Like that's kind of heavy-handed, I think. Because the service isn't as big a provision as AdSense. Like for AdSense, YouTube is allowing us to use their platform, for which I am tremendously grateful. And they are allowing us to upload tons of data to their servers, along with people who get like 5 views on their videos. They're taking a huge amount of data on. So I completely agree with the cut they take for AdSense. I don't know that I agree with the cut they take for donations. That seems a bit extreme. But no, I don't really plan on using it right now. That could change. If a lot of you really want it, let me know, I guess. But if you agree with me, let me know as well so that I can keep doing what we're doing. Next one, Syraxal says, I've been told that when lapping a CPU, do it, on a horizontal glass surface, i.e. glass coffee tables, this would be more smooth, in addition to smoother than the ordinary benchtop or say GNModmat. First of all, the ModMat is a hard surface. I saw people who are like, that thing will give way under the sanding. No, you're on, you don't have one, you don't know what you're talking about. It's a pretty hard surface. Secondly, I have we put pressure contact paper on the IHS, and it's pretty much smooth. So all the comments that were like, you should have done it on a glass table, I'm sorry, the contact paper suggests otherwise. The surface is basically perfectly flat, and we can take a shot of it, a photo or something, and include it. But the bigger point I also want to make is people seem to not pick up, or maybe it got edited out in editing. I don't know. I think it was in there though. I said how the corners were getting sanded at a different rate than the center. That's because the corners on an AMD IHS are a different height than the rest of the AMD IHS. That's why. It's not because I was applying different pressure. It's because, and I probably was, but also the contact paper at the end of it, after we did polishing and everything else off camera because it's super boring, contact paper suggested it was perfectly flat, flatter than the original. So either way, it was better than the original. Could I have done it better? Yeah, sure. I could have sanded it a bit better. We could have put it on a flatter surface, although this is pretty flat. And it could have been improved, sure. I'm not saying that there's no truth to that. But the pressure paper suggests that it was basically flat and absolutely better than the original. That's really the only thing I need to know. Was it better than the original? The answer is yes. So I'm sorry, lapping just doesn't have a big impact on something of that kind of TDP. Maybe something at higher wattage would matter more, but yeah, no. But the thing again, that AMD IHS is not perfectly level, so that seemed to be something that was missed. IHSs can be concave or convex depending on which year they were made, what manufacturer they are, and then they can also have the edges at a different height than the rest of it, as in the case of the AMD CPUs. And I'll grab that contact paper and we can take a photo of it or whatever and include it in here, hopefully. So, hey editors, whoever's editing this, throw that in. Next one, Scooby Dooby. What's your opinion on how certain consumers anthropomorphize multinational corporations like Intel, AMD, Nvidia, e.g. using terms like good and evil? Personally, it boggles my mind. Yeah, so I think it's kind of crazy that anyone would attribute human characteristics to these huge corporations for the most part. Because, like, the thing is, if you look at AMD, Intel, or Nvidia and you say they're a good company or they make good things, I would disagree in all three of those instances. The way I look at it is I try to look at this stuff at a product level. So is the product good? And if so, then that's all that I need to know. I don't know, even if you have a company that's made a strain of really bad products, I still wouldn't say they make bad things. I'd probably just try to say this chain of products is horrible, don't buy it. Because it's always possible that a company can make something good or something bad. AMD's doing pretty well with Ryzen right now. It's still possible they put out a bad CPU. Intel, same thing. Nvidia, same thing. So if they're doing well with their products right now, that doesn't mean they are a good company and they make good things. It means that product is a good thing. So I think it's very dangerous to attribute a sweeping characteristic to a company like they are good or their products are good when they can burn you even without intent just by slipping up and making a bad one. Because, I mean, yeah, a company is the sum of its people, of course, but I still wouldn't anthropomorphize it, to use your word. That it seems kind of dangerous to go that route. So, yeah, I would say just be careful of it. The company doesn't really, some of them care more about consumers than others, but you still just want to look at everything at a product level if you can, because you have to look out for yourself too. If you want to buy the best thing, then look at it product-wise, pick the best product. If you have strong moral or other considerations, that's great. I respect that, but it's not something that I personally consider as a reviewer. I don't really consider it my job to be like a moral or an ethics reviewer in addition to a product reviewer. I'm gonna look at the product. If the company's done terrible things, okay, we'll probably mention it, but I'm still looking at the product at the end of the day, and I see that as more of my job. I'm like not really qualified to do a character judgment at the same time as a product judgment. And I fully respect that it matters, but I will leave it to the individuals buying it, because I think that stuff gets into the more subjective territory. I don't feel comfortable going there. But I also, just to answer your question, no, don't I would not attribute characteristics to an entire company, even though it is some of its employees. Yeah, so that's it for this one. I think that's all my questions. We're going to try the pilot thing with 2 SGNs, I don't know, 12, 15 hours apart, something like that. Let us know what you think. We'll look at the view numbers and see if it warrants doing it continually. And as always, help us out directly on patreon.com/gamersnexus. That's the 1,000th time I've said that word this video. Or store.gamersnexus.net. If you want to pick up one of our mod mats, or if you need something cheaper but you really like it, then these are pretty damn cool. They're just giant glass crystals in the case of this one. It's like 3 pounds. So pick one of those up to help us out directly that way if you prefer. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.